if the government keeps moving things in a direction that undermines our business, we will not get the investment that we would otherwise get. From my point of view, when you look at the business, we have to find a way to stay ahead unless we get some impetus from the government to unpeel some regulation and to cut us some slack. I believe that we are energetic beings. We thrive when we are with other people. Yeah. I think it would be a really cold day when you went downstairs and there were robots everywhere.
Kieron, welcome to the podcast. So today we're joined by Kieron Williams, Director of Technology and IT for Brunning Price. We've sort of spent 15, 20 minutes while I've been setting the kit up, getting to know you a little bit. And I think we've covered conspiracy theories, Dubai, unicorns, coming this close to unicorn success, bees above a house, Ring doorbells, did we go to the moon? And all surrounding the context and frame of an incredibly successful technology career, which we've just sort of established, now got an overlap with Belma in terms of the PE involvement and where that fits in. So firstly, thank you for joining us today. And actually thank you for sharing your wonderful space. I think regular viewers will notice that this is not our traditional room, but it's very, very nice to be here. So thank you.
I think we'll have to include the video of the bathroom with the sofas in. I think this is one of the most magnificent bathrooms I've ever been in.
I think I explained that when people choose which pub to go to, we've realised that ladies' bathrooms are right up.
I would agree.
Do not skimp.
Do not skimp on the bathroom. That's right. Give it square footage and money. So welcome, Kieron. Thank you for being here. Would you mind giving us just like a brief intro around your career journey? So what has led you and what transformations have led you to be in the position that you are now?
Sure. I mean, as with so many people, this was never part of the plan. To be honest, I don't know what the plan was, but I did electronic engineering at Leeds, and I think going back, I was really fascinated by machinery, fascinated by what you could do with electronics, and I mean, I'm still fascinated by robots and things of that nature. I think it's quite a primitive urge. It's that kind of action at a distance, from the first caveman throwing a rock at something. That just develops into where we are now with technology. And so I think that I didn't ever see myself getting out of that. That was the plan. And I applied for a PhD. And the original PhD I wanted to go for was actually based around research into GPS. There was a very interesting guy at Leeds University that wanted to land aeroplanes on GPS.
Oh, right.
And he had done that by combining the Russian GLONASS system with the American GPS system, because the more satellites you have access to, the greater the granularity of your accuracy. And so the primary goal for him was landing airplanes on aircraft carriers, because at the moment, if you have a pilot, you need to turn your aircraft carrier and the aircraft carrier group into the wind to give them a little bit more advantage in trying to park the aeroplane.
Oh, it makes yeah.
And he was saying, well, the idea would be that if your ship has GPS and your plane has GPS, you can land an aeroplane automatically without having to turn into the wind, and that would save millions of pounds and so on and so forth.
Right.
I don't think they do it even now. But that's kind of the nature of a PhD. You're looking into a big old crystal ball. But he told me that I needed a first, and if I didn't get a first, the deal was off.
Okay.
So typically, I got my results. I missed it by a shave, and he was on holiday. And this is back in the day before mobile telephones. So I went looking for a different PhD, and there was a really interesting guy there who was doing research into putting fiber optic communications onto silicon. So in effect, instead of having gold interconnect in your central processing unit, you would actually use small fiber optic, like really small fiber optic cables to move more data. Because as you shrink your transistor size and your interconnect size, you get this thing called crosstalk, which is where the fibers or the interconnects are so tiny, they become very efficient antenna. Okay. And so your chip doesn't work anymore. Now, obviously, people have managed to get to quite an advanced state with the current technology. And I don't think anybody's still using the thing that I was looking into, which is where you put polymers into little silicon trenches, and then you put lasers at either end and what have you, and you have very fast communication on the chip.
Okay.
Anyway, long story short, I thought I'd missed my preference PhD. I ended up on the other one. And of course, when he came back from holiday, he said, I'd let you do it anyway. But in the summer between getting exam results and actually starting the PhD, I went to work with a very interesting guy, a friend of my dad's, who was starting a technology business based around virtual reality exhibitions. And this is back in,
just remind us again, like, when was this?
1996.
1996. And there was already a business looking at VR.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
absolutely.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
VR in the browser.
Right. Okay.
And actually, so the technology was created by a company called Superscape down in Hook in Hampshire. And they were a partner. So the guy's name was Steve Martin, very good friend. And so he had a small events and exhibition company already. And one of his main business partners was Superscape. And he realized that you could use their technology to put exhibitions and conferences online in a web browser. And in 1996, that meant Netscape Navigator.
Yeah.
Yes.
Internet Explorer didn't even exist.
Yeah.
And so I worked with him during that summer, just on the concept. But I went back to university. But then he was on the phone 3 or 4 weeks later saying that the Department of Trade and Industry loved his concept and had a place on a trade mission going to Thailand.
Wow.
He was too busy. His wife was too busy. Did I fancy it? And he'd just been sponsored by the Daily Telegraph. So it was blowing up as far as he was concerned.
Yeah.
Things were really starting to move. So I agreed, jumped on a plane, went to Thailand for a week. The Queen was there on the Royal Yacht Britannia. The King and Queen of Thailand were there. The big do at the embassy. And it was really, really cool.
Yeah.
What an incredible experience. I think when you're, probably for most of us, you can't even imagine being given that much responsibility at such a young age.
21.
Yeah, exactly. You sort of think, what do I know at 21? But, it's amazing that he trusted you and was like, actually, go and represent our interests. That's amazing.
I could talk. I'll find out. So anyway, I basically came back from that trip, went back to my concrete box in Leeds to research this fiber optic chip thing.
Yeah.
He got on the phone and said, look, that was a massive success. You need to be a part of this. He offered me a stake in the company and a role as technical director. And I decided to leave. So I went and joined him, and we had some success. So that we did that for 8 years.
Wow.
I mean, it wasn't all success.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, at that point, there were an awful lot of people talking about .com boom and all the rest of it. But actually, there was a huge amount of people that didn't really know what it was all about and didn't know, where the growth and the long-term businesses were going to come from. But anyway, we ended up taking that out to Dubai. We had a couple of years out there, which was fun. But I ended up, in effect, the Dubai side of things came to an end with the attacks of 9/11, which brought all of that to a close. It was quite messy. We came back to the UK, started up again, but we'd lost a certain amount of enthusiasm and energy after the whole thing, because we'd come very close to making a real success of it. And so we continued for, I think, about 18 months before I was approached to come and work at Brunning Price, which was only 12 pubs at the time.
Yeah.
It was
right.
quite that's not tiny, but it was a relatively modest business.
Yeah.
Created by Jerry Brunning and Graham Price.
Yeah.
I was asked to come and have a chat with them to see if I wanted the job, if they wanted me to run their IT. They were very technically savvy.
Okay. Interesting.
And Jerry in particular, he has another company now, which is doing very well. And he has a particular way of viewing the world.
Okay.
And he would not take a piece of software off the shelf if it didn't do exactly what he needed it to do.
Sure.
Which no software does.
Exactly. And this is why we have a development, there's an element of what we do, which is software development.
Yeah.
You may think that is unnecessary, but the simple fact is, and their favorite phrase was always, you never let the tail wag the dog.
Yeah.
So in a lot of companies like this, the accounts team dictate the direction of travel for IT. And in many cases, the head of finance is in charge of IT, and it's not always the most efficient setup. Whereas Jerry and Graham had a very clear vision of, we want our pubs to be pubby.
Yeah.
We want all of the IT to sit in the background. We don't want it to distract from running a good pub.
Yeah.
It's all about people. It's all about good food and good drink and so on and so forth. And so your job is to make technology that supports the operation.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
Really facilitate that environment through technology rather than dominating it with applications and over engineering and complexity that
Absolutely.
that they didn't want the customer to, because it can be that friction in a pub.
Yeah, and don't let the accounts team dictate what in effect what the operation does.
I'd love to talk, I'm sure we'll get into it, the relationship between technology and the business, because some guess that they are technology native organizations. And by that, I mean the access to spending in their business it's not unlimited, but it's so sympathetic, and it's very much, no, we know we're a technology business and we know that that's where we've got to invest, and there's got to be some discussion and make sure we're spending it in the right way, but it's very accessible. Whereas here, I'm assuming, we mentioned we get the cost of running premises like this, the cost of the amount of staff that the majority of those businesses that was mentioned, probably 80% of the organization work in technology in some respect. Here, I'm sure you make it looks very different. So be interested to find out how you've built that relationship with finance and the lens that you look at it from, the learnings you've taken. Yeah.
There's a really interesting facet to the business also, which is that the managers are responsible for their P&Ls.
The pub manager. Right.
Ryan is in charge of his pub.
Okay.
He is challenged to run it as a business.
Yeah.
In fact, he's the managing director of a multi-million pound business.
Yeah.
He gets a broken down P&L, and if he doesn't like what he sees on the IT line, he rings me up.
Yeah.
Right. He's every right to challenge it because he's on profit share.
Okay.
So if I'm not doing a good job, and if my team are not doing a good job, and they're wasting his money as he sees it, he can pick up the phone and say, "What's this about?
What's going on?
What's this like? Why am I paying this for my printer? Why am I paying this for my tills?" Blank. And it's a very healthy way of doing things because you're accountable to your customer.
I think what I really like is the concept that you mentioned is that this is a very people driven business. It's a people led business, and we want the tech to seamlessly just work in the background during that period, because you've been here for 20 years. There's been a lot of innovations, and Moore's law dictates that technology will innovate and get smaller, etc. So I imagine you would have had to take them through several different technology transformations in terms of providing that seamless service. What would you say was the biggest and most successful transformation that you've kind of delivered for?
I'd say connectivity, which is really simple.
Yeah,
but it's convincing people to spend the money to put the appropriate connectivity in place, because at the end of the day, that is the foundation for all of your technology. If you can move data around more quickly, it just makes people happy.
Yeah.
Tills are more responsive.
Yeah.
Stuff gets done.
Yeah.
And so, it's a very simple answer. It's something that, it really shouldn't have taken as long as it should, or as long as it did in some cases. But, when I first started, we'd only just moved away from dial-up modem.
I was going to say, can you describe that journey to us? So what you adopted and the volume of premises that you've got now, the complexity of 5G, and I'm sure I don't know what.
Well, we talked about earlier that actually some of the pubs don't even get 4G, right? So it's kind of like,
we're on Starlink. We've kind of jumped to generation. So
how have you taken the business through that?
Yeah, it was very simple. Again, because we started from a very, very low cost base.
Yeah.
And because the technology was such an afterthought in some respect. The pubs were on dial-up modems on Dratec 2830s, if anybody remembers a Dratec modem.
Absolutely not, no.
Good.
Take your word for it.
They were brilliant.
If the lady who does the technology side of this doesn't understand, I can fully admit I don't.
But you were looking at, in effect, what now is what everybody has in their home, and it had half a dozen Ethernet ports in the back of it.
Right.
All you needed.
Okay, yeah.
Because the tills were ring and ping. As in, you pressed buttons and it did that funny noise and produced a receipt from a print and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And the PDQs each had their own, so the payment card devices each had their own phone line, and they would dial up per transaction.
Yes, I remember the sound.
Yeah, but the vast majority of transactions were cash.
If you had someone at the bar who was buying a pint every hour and they bought 4 pints every time, that would be done right way.
But again, this is one of the things with the business is we would always offer people a tab, which is a part of the way that we do things, and that has several different. Psychologically, your valued customer, put it on a tab. No.
Yeah.
At the time, it was equally about we don't want to sit here with a PDQ.
Reduce the traffic on the network,
and paying transaction fees every time. You're earning your margins every time you take a payment.
Yeah.
And so
I never even thought about it like that.
No, I didn't.
Fair. Yeah. But it's like you're right. Psychologically, it does sort of feel like, okay, you trust me to pay it after I've drunk you dry.
And the tabs all used to be on the board. And
How
so
do you mean, sorry?
They would have a board with little hooks, and each table would have a hook, and you'd every time you took an order, whether that was pudding, starters, whatever, another piece of paper would go on the board. And each of our pubs used to have air tubes.
With the
And part of it was novelty, but actually part of it was practicality. We were probably one of the last industries that still had air tubes, because it used to be factories and retail shops and all the rest of it. People loved the air tube. And some interesting things have been sent up, Ed, in the business, because of course they're always pieces of paper. Because,
that's amazing.
It goes from front of house and arrives in the kitchen, and it's just a simple laugh. But we had air tubes, and so it was the transition from being a privately owned company to being a publicly owned company when we were purchased by the Restaurant Group PLC back in, I think it was 2007, something like that, that we realised that we had to make a few changes just because some of our systems and practices didn't stand up to audit.
Moving from a limited, presumably privately owned business by the two chaps that you mentioned to a PLC, where from a regulatory perspective, reporting, a visibility, a compliance, security. How did you tackle that from a technology point of view, but also thinking about, the podcast? How did you tackle that personally? Because so I've been on the other side. Yeah. So I've gone from a PLC to a PE, privately owned business, in a fairly short space of time. They'd owned a 26% into 100% over 18 months. And it was very difficult for a variety of reasons, which I'm very happy to talk about. Both good and bad. That sounded all negative. It wasn't. But the availability of cash became a lot more readily available, but equally the requirement for it to be paid back. There was a time limit on, we've spent all this and it's available now, but now we want it back. We want it in 18 months, 2 years, whatever. Reporting goes down because they're not every quarter going to the market going, hey, well, look at our report and look at our compliance, look at what we're doing. It's, no, we've got a good temperature check here. How did you, so that was my experience, but as I say, it was very much going the other way from fairly constrained, not that it wasn't well run, but very compliant, very onerous on those areas, to maybe a bit more relaxed, maybe a bit more freedom, but the aggression of return on spend, the aggression of scale, the aggression of decision-making was far more intense than perhaps when we were a public business.
Yeah, it was a fascinating transformation.
Yeah.
We were lucky because we were the second pub company that the Restaurant Group PLC bought.
Okay.
So they had already bought a company called Bluebeckers, which was a beautiful little pub company, about 20 odd pubs in the home counties.
Oh, lovely.
Kind of Basingstoke through to Canterbury, that sort of area. And they ruined them in 2 years.
Right, okay.
And the CEO was a clever guy, a guy called Andrew Page at the time. And he loved Bluebeckers, bought Bluebeckers, didn't appreciate the difference between running, at the time, their big thing was Frankie and Benny's.
Yeah.
Didn't appreciate that there was a difference between Frankie and Benny's and a pub.
Right,
and
okay.
so they hollowed out the Bluebeckers organisation, dropped in the technology and the operational process from Frankie and Benny's, and thought that what would happen is immediate improvement in profitability and success. Exactly the opposite happened.
Yeah.
They were loss-making in 2 years from being a very, very healthily profitable company. When they came knocking on Brunning Price's door, it was basically for the culture.
Okay, I love that.
I mean, we had nice pubs, but it was another big ticket. And so from Andrew Page's point of view, his message to his senior team in London was, you do not go to Chester without my permission.
Right.
We're not wrecking another one.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
So he learned his lessons.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they really stood at hands off.
Absolutely. So we had one interface, a lady called Vanessa Rapier, who was just our friendly face into the PLC.
Yeah.
And so, although from our point of view, we thought the world was coming to an end.
Yeah.
Because not so much me, because I was relatively fresh in at that point, only a couple of years.
Yeah.
But I'd been told that there was no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It was going to be a family private company forever and a day, and so on and so forth. And of course, it's not that I was like, it was simply, we don't know what the future holds.
Yeah.
Priorities change, people's lives change. It's just a fact.
Of course they do.
Yeah. Then sometimes an opportunity crops up and it's too good to pass up, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So for lots of different reasons, it was a decision, and this is the key thing. Jerry and Graham's company, they can do what they like because it's their company.
Yeah.
There are not many upsides to owning a company and having the responsibility of several hundred employees.
Yeah.
Being able to make that decision, it was probably a very difficult decision for them to make.
I can imagine.
And I respect them for it. It was their decision to make.
Yeah.
Graham stayed on as a consultant, and he was very much, sort of still in charge on a day-to-day basis, thankfully. And so from our point of view, we had quite a lot of the long-term crew who had very much bought into the idea of it being a family company, who were really upset.
Yeah.
Really upset, especially on the day. But people got used to the idea quite quickly, especially because the world didn't come to an end.
Yeah.
But of course, from my point of view, the first person to get fired in an acquisition is normally the admin teams, whether it be finance or
operations.
So the fact that they didn't. Now, actually, to be fair, they didn't actually come and tell us that they were never going to get rid of us.
Yeah.
It was always the sort of Damocles really for the next 15 odd years.
Okay.
Because it's only more recently that there's been a change in direction. And part of it is the move back to private ownership. When you're a PLC, you have to appreciate you can never make anybody a promise because market changes. And
of course,
you have to be able to make decisions. So nobody's ever come and say, going to go to an IT team, for example, and say, we're never going to outsource you. Because it's not... It would be a crazy thing to say. So the point being that the transition was very much eased by the fact that there was admission that they'd messed up Blue Becker's. They needed our culture as well as our buildings.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of detail, but over the next sort of 5 or 6 years, we ended up in a position where we assimilated Blue Becker's into Brunning Price. So now the Blue Becker's pubs are just a part of the infrastructure.
So you became, in essence, the mothership.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay.
That's very interesting that, because I really like what you said is that they bought you for the culture. And obviously on this podcast, we talk about everything that's transformation, right? So that would have been quite a large scale transformation for you at the time as a company. How important do you think culture is in the context of transformations?
I think culture is absolutely king. And particularly as a technical team, whether that be IT or finance or whatever it is, you absolutely have to understand the business.
Yeah.
And that goes from customers to your internal customers to, the product. You've got to be proud of the product. And if you're not using your product, I think you need to ask yourself why.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, not every company sells widgets that you can use or pubs that you can go to, what have you. But I know quite a few people that work for companies where they wouldn't use the product. Producers, and I think you're missing something there because you need to aspire to be more than just a function. You need to aspire to be a part of the whole proposition.
Yeah,
it's not good enough to say, well, yeah, we just turn up, we punch the clock, and we do this particular function because that's the point at which you can be very, very easily outsourced because you're not really adding anything over and above, what another outsourcing company could do.
Yeah.
If you really like your product and you really get under the skin of the business and understand how it ticks from one end to the other, then you can start to bring real value, real insight, and you can maybe avoid some of the pitfalls of just using generic IT to solve a problem.
Yeah.
It's always relevant.
Earlier we talked about the connectivity being one of the biggest things that you've kind of delivered as part of was that before or after the joining the PLC?
This has been a progression, really, but the connectivity has been an advantage all the way through. And, every time we took a step up in terms of the quality of networking, the quality of connectivity, the number of phone calls has reduced, the number of issues has reduced, and the general happiness of our end users has reduced. It's quite an interesting correlation.
That's so interesting because you've said that culture is really, really important and that connectivity was one of your kind of maybe bigger successes, right?
Yeah,
delivering
absolutely.
This. Is there a correlation, I'm wondering, given that you are a people business and it seems like from the conversation so far, I'm taking away that your mission is to reduce the IT overhead in order to make the business successful. So could you just maybe give us a little bit more of a context around how do you think connectivity impacts culture and how IT has helped you to solve some of, drive that positive?
Very simply reduces friction. So our managers, they are not employed to be technically competent,
right?
Which poses certain challenges in certain areas, but they are there to run a good pub.
Yeah,
and running a good pub. Okay, you're managing a team of people. In some cases, our pubs will have 50 people. So you're a people manager.
Yeah,
but your big challenge is to just make each of your customers really, really happy. Yeah. Your customers need to know that they're going to be welcomed. In effect, it's like having a dinner party every day for 200 people.
Yes, dream come true. Yeah, you're right.
And this is why we have the managers that we have, because you want to have that attitude. You need to be looking forward to customers coming through the door. You can't be sitting there thinking, well, I wish I could just sit in the office and do admin for a few more hours.
Yeah,
that's not how it should be. And so our mission is to allow our managers to spend more time on the floor.
Yeah.
We need to reduce administrative friction. We need to automate whatever we can automate, whether that's checking in invoices and deliveries and the kind of stock side of things or, helping out with things like rotoring and all of that. The big administrative tasks just need to go.
Yeah.
So that we can
and has technology adopted that now from an automation perspective? Think about rotoring, I guess track and trace of deliveries. I guess wastage is a huge concern in terms of margin erosion.
Yeah.
Does technology consume that?
It kind of, again, we're not a normal company. We could be more aggressively, technically innovative, but, we're sat in a 500-year-old building, and
we are.
There are certain technical limitations to our operation and to our buildings and all the rest of it. I mean, we don't get a completely free hand.
Yeah.
We've got a place in Wales, for example, a place called the Cornmill. Beautiful building, but it's made of stones.
Yeah.
And so even a simple networking task, for example, you can't just run a cable through it. And again, we don't want to see cables. Customers don't want to see cables. So it's a silly example, but in some cases, it's that kind of thing where you have to be a little bit more sensitive and you have to spend a little bit more time to hide what you're doing.
You say that though, but earlier when we were speaking, what you showed me, the widgets on your phone that gives you real-time updates. Could you just tell us a little bit about that? Because I actually think, working in the space that I do work in, KPIs, always a really, really huge focus. It basically tells you how well the transformation is going. To get real-time updates from those KPIs is phenomenal, really. And I think that from a tech team it's a huge success. So could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, we've got a few different technologies a little bit like that, because our operation, on the one hand, we obviously try to be in the background, but we're not Luddites, at the end of the day. The whole operation runs on iPads, for example.
Right.
Which is, and the idea of that is your tills, your booking system, everything is on iPad.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, where we were using till, points of sale, they're £2,000 each, and they break, and people tip.
Are they really?
Yeah.
And so you'd end up with an engineer having to come on site and replace a screen or muck out the beer or whatever it may be, £2,000 a pop.
Yeah.
iPads are £250 a pop.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden it's almost a disposable item. So if they drop it, they send it to our screen guy, Chris.
Yeah.
And he just has a bench littered with broken, smashed iPads, puts a new screen on them, zaps them. They go back onto Apple Business Manager. They go out to a pub. And we can deploy all the stuff remotely. So again, it's actually quite a slick system. And the way, I don't know if you ever used Apple Business Manager, but as an example with that, it used to be that we would have to hot stage tills. So, a piece of hardware would come into the office, we'd put a program, put all the programs on it, all the rest of it. We now ship iPads direct from Apple. Yeah. They arrive in the pub sends us the serial number, we put it on the mobile device manager, and it deploys the wallpaper, all of the little gizmos, all of the app stores and all the rest of it. So in effect, now we run completely zero hands on hardware replacement. Yeah. Even down to the iMac in the office. They get a brand new iPad out of the box. Yeah. We plug it into the mobile device management system and it will deploy everything down to them. Yeah. So we no longer have to touch anything at all. So again, to the point, it's we can be technically advanced without being necessarily flashy about it. And coming back to the widget. Yeah. One of the issues that we have now with, again, just the way the world is, we have to be very on our productivity. Yes. The cost of hiring and employing people has gone through the roof, unfortunately. Yeah, it has. So there's a huge emphasis on our whole business model for, having a productive workforce. Now, it struck me that it would be really useful to be able to see what your productivity was on the floor at any time. And so we do that now. Yeah. So we have a live feed into the tills. We have a live feed into the rotor. So I can tell you for the past hour how much money you took and how many people were on the floor taking that money. Yeah. So part of having the widget is there are several things. Firstly, our guys are very, very competitive about sales. You get to 2:00 on a Monday, they all want to know who's in the lead. Yes.
Intercompany.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
This place versus pub down the road, you can see on a Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m, Grand National, we are, I'm assuming it's in the tens of thousands. We're here, you're there. Yeah. How are we going to close at 10 p.m, right? Yeah.
It's a big kudos being top of the heap. And that's all part of being an efficient business. That there should be some competitiveness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So giving people live sales is one thing. We've had that for 4 or 5 years. Having live access to the rotor, but also there's no point in being productive if your customers are not happy. Yeah. And so what we do is we pull in our sales, we pull in our rotor, we also pull in our live customer reviews. Mm. Now, obviously, there's a delay on that because you don't know when customers are writing reviews. So I'm not going to pretend that that's real time, but it's live data. As if a customer sends a review in, that goes on the system immediately. So what I wanted to do was to reduce the friction in terms of accessing that, because normally it would be, well, I need to go and find my dashboard. So I've got to go to the office. I've got to open up my browser. I've got to log into a system, and then I can get my data. So I thought, wouldn't that be nice if we just embed it in the desktop and it's just
Love
there?
that.
And so now we created an app with a freelancer. You can embed it in an iMac desktop, you can embed it in an iPad desktop, and you can embed it in an iPhone desktop. And so now you've got operations managers running around with their patches sales and their patches NPS and their patches productivity in real time.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't necessarily inform your long-term strategy, but it can be quite interesting, particularly with the productivity, to walk into a pub, because at the end of the day, there's a touchy-feely aspect. So you walk into a pub and you say, well, everybody feels very busy. Have we got enough crew on? Are we able to serve our customers properly?
Yeah.
Let me have a look at what our take-ins per hour. Is it too high?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then conversely, there's a lot of people standing around. Is this optimal?
Yeah.
And so all you have to do is to encourage people to chase the average.
Yeah.
And that average, by its very nature, will move in a productive direction.
I think having access to that on your phone, and I really liked the idea that, you from head office can see aggregate data, whereas, if you are in that pub, you can see your pub and your pub's performance. I think that's fantastic. KPIs like customer satisfaction scores, or the NPS, your finance data, and your team productivity data to be kind of at your fingertips is honestly, I think that's really innovative, and it's probably further ahead of a lot of companies that I've worked with.
Yeah, well, this comes back to the overall company ethos, which is that the manager is genuinely in charge of their business.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do that, you've got to give them the information.
You've got to give them the information.
And so that's just what's on the real-time widget. We also have dashboards that we give them, which are live dashboards, which allow them to see, for example, food sales. And you can look at your food sales in lots of different dimensions. So you could say, well, what's my gross profit this week?
Yeah.
Show me which dishes are selling.
Yeah.
Show me within the context of my menu which dishes are selling.
Yeah.
And we have all of that information on dashboards. Because again, if you're going to go to a manager and say, well, you're in charge of this business, this is your concern, and you're on a profit share, well, you've got to give them the information that they need to make decisions. And again, I wouldn't try and sit here and say that they go and sit and analyze those dashboards every week or every month. But by its very presence, even if they never use it, they know they've got it.
The data's there.
And it says, somebody has given me not just the keys, but also access to the data. I don't have to wait for the ops manager to turn up once a month for an accounts review to say, sorry about this, but it's not efficient, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's never a surprise. When I looked on your website and our team section, there was the coolest role I think I've ever seen in my entire life. And I'd love to know how to become this role, but it was something like chief food officer or head of food or something like that. And so I was like, wow, how do I get that job? But I imagine that the types of dishes that are selling, you can, if you compare that seasonally, I suppose that's quite informative data for that person as well, right? Like, well, actually,
So just again, to come back to the way that the company works, you come back to Jerry and Graham. They wanted the manager and the chef to manage their own menus. And this is where we are a little bit different to the rest of the industry.
Yeah.
Because our managers and chefs can change their menus on a daily basis.
Okay.
Again, this has changed.
That's a nightmare data-wise, by the way. That's just the heebie-jeebies. What do you mean?
Let me tell you how it works. Let me tell you how. So when you go back 20 years ago, they literally had a Word document.
Yeah.
The font was Comic Sans, which
you
might not be old enough to loathe it, but you should. Trust me on that one. But the manager and chef could literally roll out of bed and say, there's a special offer on sea bass. It's going on the menu. And they would change the Word document.
Yeah.
Which, of course, you can't do that now.
Yeah.
No.
So that has evolved over time. And the suite of applications that we have now are 4 systems. So you start with something called Seasonal Menu Manager.
Mm-hmm.
So the structure is head of food, Mr. Carney.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Look to me, that guy.
He would tell you it's not quite as much fun as it's.
Oh, right. Okay. Don't ruin it for me.
It's quite a lot of, sometimes they have to go deep on turbot or something like that. And he'll lose a week to fish.
Not the worst way to lose a week, I'll be honest. But yeah, I love turbot.
Mike has 8 executive chefs.
Mm-hmm.
And each of those executive chefs is in charge and responsible for the food for 10 pubs. So, but they work as a team as well. So what they will do is they use a system that we have called Seasonal Menu Manager.
Mm-hmm.
And Seasonal Menu Manager is once a quarter, we will give the pubs access to another batch of recipes. So that can be anything up to 400 or 500 recipes,
Wow.
all with seasonal produce with a seasonal kind of slant.
Yeah.
So, and that will be done because obviously there's a commercial aspect. So Mike will be on the phone to his turbot supplier, for example. And if there is a good deal to be had, that will be given to the execs as, look, come up with some seasonal dishes around turbot, sea bass, lamb, whatever it may be. They will throw ideas. So it steps you through as a wizard. So they start off with a scratch pad and the execs will put in their suggestions. Mike will then accept or decline. So he will put the best 300 or 400 recipes forward to the next stage, which is the development stage. So this is where it links into our recipe system or recipe manager, all developed in-house.
Brilliant.
Recipe manager taps into our parent company because our parent company look after the supply chain.
Right.
So although Mike deals with the personal relationship with the different companies, when it comes to getting the data in, that has to go through a formal supply chain and into a formal supply chain database. So we have API access to that supply chain.
Okay.
So we will pull those ingredients out of the supply chain every night, complete with all of the allergy and calorific information, and that's key.
Yes.
So we quite like, in some cases, to have local producers. Now, it's very difficult to carry on with this to an extent, both in terms of the commerce and in terms of just the way that business is. Things move very quickly, but we do have lots of different suppliers that will supply cheeses, fish, meat, whatever it may be. They will supply the data for their products into the top of the supply chain, and that will then be verified. And your sausage, for example, will end up on your list of ingredients. And if the allergies or the recipe for the sausage changes, that will come through the next day, so that everything is always up to date.
Yeah.
The execs will construct their recipes based on that supply chain data. That's the key thing.
Yeah.
So they will take a lamb shoulder. They will pop it on that recipe alongside some peas and some other stuff. It will come together as a dish. They will then cook it. They will photograph it. If it's one of the more sort of well-used recipes, particularly at Christmas, they will video it being plated up.
Right.
So you can actually literally see, item by item, how that, because we're all fresh food, nothing comes in a bag. Yeah. And so it will show you how all of that goes together. Then the system will do its calculations based on the weights and what the finished product is. And it will have all of the calorific and the allergy information in the recipe.
Yeah.
So at the point at which the exec is happy with that dish, they will then send it on the next step of the journey, which is the technical sign-off, which it gets sent back to group.
Okay.
Because they have some food nerds that will sit there and sign off those dishes. They double check everything, as in, is it rational that recipe is made up of those things, and are the allergies pulling through correctly?
Yeah.
So there's a double sign-off.
Yeah.
So unless it has an executive sign-off and a technical sign-off, it cannot go on a menu. The next step is the commercial side. So that then goes to the ops team and they will check the pricing, because we have places in Kensington where their overheads mean that they have a slightly different business model, a slightly different set of calculations versus Preston.
Yeah,
of course.
So the ops managers will take those recipes and will set pub-specific pricing.
Yeah.
And they also sit down with the manager and say, which ones do you want in your list for the coming season? And so they'll go through and say, there are 3 different lamb rump recipes. Which one do you want? Yeah. And the managers and the chefs and the operations guys will sit down. And so they will then end up with, again, a couple of hundred recipes that have been sanctioned as
approved.
Yeah, approved. Because, if you have a really fancy dish, that might work really well in Kensington, that might work really well in Kew, but it might not work so well in Shropshire.
Yes.
They might like something a little bit more hearty, for example. So those lists then exist. So then the final piece of the puzzle is a system called Menu Manager. So the managers use this every day because the menu changes every day. Now, the menu doesn't wholeheartedly or wholesale change every day. They're not going to take off, a whole bunch of dishes and replace them, because it's not how these sort of kitchens work. Yeah. However, the soup changes every day. Yeah. And they will cycle the different recipes during the week. Yeah. And of course, we have a completely different menu on a Sunday because we have Sunday roast.
Sunday lunch.
So the managers will open up Menu Manager. They'll swap the soup out. They can swap whatever they like, but only with those approved dishes.
Yes. Okay.
Because that's your corporate oversight. And that's your protection against any kind of issues in terms of allergies and all the rest.
Yeah.
So at the point at which they set their menu, they can then press a button and it will generate a PDF with the appropriate formatting. And different pubs have different templates. So Coco Momo in Kensington is a little bit groovier than the standard pub template. That then sends all of those dishes down to the till. Our tills update real time, which is not normal.
Yeah.
It also sends it up to the website, and it sends it up to all the other places that we keep a record of what menus.
So in real time,
real time, 60 seconds.
Wow.
So you rock up, you change, you swap your daily menu out for your Sunday menu, or you just change your soup and a couple of other dishes. You press a button, and then that goes down to the tills.
So I'm imagining that's not how it used to be, right? Like you said, it was Comic Sans, then you PDF, then you print it, then, I don't know, laminate it. And that's kind of the
not laminate.
Oh, no, of course
we have
not.
the date on the top of the menu every day. The reason for that is slightly psychologically. Even if the menu didn't change, customers, we are a premium operation. We're fresh food kitchens, and customers need to know.
That it was, no dates. It sounds like from the conversation that we're having that there's been quite a big journey in terms of technological advancement. So, and I think you've done it with 4 people, did you say? Is that?
Yeah, we have 4 people in the team.
I think that's quite incredible, because to be able to
give us a picture of like the operator, like how many pubs are you servicing from?
80 pubs.
Wow.
And this is kind of the point. And this is where, you go back to the DNA at the very outset. It was Jerry and Graham's money. It was Jerry and Graham's business. And that's still in the DNA of the company.
And is that how it feels in your team? You feel like, well, if our expenses policy, it's very simple. So treat it as you would treat your own money.
Yeah.
Would you go and buy a first class ticket to London at 8 on a Tuesday? No one would, because it's 260 quid from Leeds. I don't care how much money you've got. No one who was so. But what most people would do is actually, I'll go at 7 because I think it's the 6:56 because it's the 7 a.m. cutoff. It's then £89. Bang. So then we never kick back and expect for that reason. If you go and have lunch and no one's in the office and it's, I don't know, you're just feeling a bit down, expense it, because that's how you would treat your own money. Would you go and take all your mates, go, actually, no one's in the office today, why don't we club? I sense that that's how it feels here. Like you treat it as you would if it was yours.
Yeah, because again, that goes throughout the whole organisation.
Yeah.
So, the managers are responsible for the profitability of their pub. Now, that means that if they have people that are working a long shift, they feed them. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, it's not fillet steak. It's just a nice, healthy bit of to carry you through and make the day, kind of sing along. And it's the same sort of attitude. Our office is in a pub.
Is that?
Yeah, we're above Rake Hall.
We were wondering this actually. Yeah.
And it's great, but it puts you much closer to the business. And, you can see that the guys are having a really busy day, and it just makes you think, well, we should be having a really busy day too.
Yeah.
Work a little bit harder.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
When you've hired people into the team, how have you, I think firstly, technology functions can become feral in terms of their size servicing any business. I think that they can overhire. I think that roles can become over-engineered, overcomplicated. And I tend to sum up this, I can do it now. The closeness to the proximity that you have to the business, and it's very clear to me that customer sits at the heart of this.
Yeah.
And I think in most businesses that we speak to, the customer's at the heart. And then you actually go and visit their operations, it's reasonably clear that for big parts of the organisation it does. And I think it's pretty evident here that the customer is very key here. To service that size business with 4 people, when we spoke about the complex, the recipe system, the MPS, the live dashboard, point of sale, commercial management, tracking, reporting. To do that with 4 people is pretty extraordinary. How have you instilled the ethos? How have you made sure you get the right people? How do you motivate? Maybe motivation actually when you're above a pub is quite easy, but you know what I'm sort of getting. How have you really ensured that the right people with the right attitude, with the right values are joining? Because it's I don't mind saying it's a very special place. We're in a very special building.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely. I mean, the culture within the team is absolutely key. And it's quite interesting how we've ended up with people in the team. So, for example, my interface between IT and the pubs is a lady called Rachel. And she was a pub manager for 10 years.
Okay.
In fact, maybe even longer than 10 years. But, for a long time, she had a problem with her shoulder. She couldn't carry plates anymore.
Okay.
And she was, made available on a short-term basis to the office. Can anybody, make Rachel busy? Mm-hmm. And so
a call to any operational function.
Well, it was a question for me we were in the process of rolling out VoIP phones.
Okay. Yeah.
And what we wanted to try was a distributed call center.
Sure.
The idea being the guys never had time to answer the phone. So what if we had half a dozen people dotted around the country that had specifically allocated pubs, and they answered the phone on behalf of the pub? Because again, with that technology, it can tell you who the customer's trying to call.
Makes sense.
You can answer as the pub.
Yeah.
So if they're calling the Red Lion, hello, Red Lion.
Yeah.
You've got the booking system in front of you. Why not
Yeah.
make it work? Now, if they really want to speak to the pub, you could put them through to the pub. And so Rachel was available. She had one arm that worked. So she was the original, we called them the telebods.
Yeah.
Now, they're no longer with us, unfortunately, because the world moves on slightly.
Sure.
And as more people have gone on to online bookings, the number of telephone calls has dropped
down
slightly. And there are lots of reasons why. At the time, it worked really well. And unfortunately, you have to continue to evolve.
Yeah.
Your good idea from 5 years ago is not your good idea necessarily. Anyway, Rachel came on board to do that. And then we were rolling out a new online booking system, and we were rolling out a few other bits. So she got into the IT function in that respect. And then it's just grown from there. And so now she has made a real science of the online booking system and how you can maximize the opportunity and maximize the throughput. But the key thing with it is you can make a lot of people unhappy if you send too many customers to their pub. So if you don't get the flow right, as in how long do you allow a customer on a table such that they don't feel rushed?
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
So there is a science. So you've got so many tables, and you would like to sit several customers at each of those tables during the day in the nicest possible way.
Yeah.
But you need to do it in a flow that doesn't overwhelm the kitchen. Because if you go back to when we had paper diaries, which is actually not that long ago, what would happen is everybody wants to sit down for Sunday lunch at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Your kitchen can only cook so many meals at one time, especially in a fresh food kitchen.
Yeah.
And so the manager would say, only take 20 covers, 30 covers, 40 covers, whatever it was at 1 o'clock. But then Billy's granny would ring up. She wants 8 people in. And Billy, I'll squeeze you in.
Yeah.
And somebody else would get squashed in, and somebody else would get squashed in. And then what would happen is we would get into Sunday service. The kitchen would fall over at 1.
Yeah.
We'd get complaints and stressed chefs. And it was just not chaos. It was how things run, but it was not optimal.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because Rachel's been there and run it and knows exactly how it works, she won't overgear it, but she will run it. She will squeeze every drip from that lemon.
Yeah.
And so, but the key thing is, and when we got this, got it out and got it running the first time, we would have chefs saying, well, I just did 200 covers and it was fine.
Yeah.
Because it was paced appropriately and it just works. And so there's a real science to getting that right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Working with a company at the moment, and they need a variety of people. And actually, for one particular team, the art of this is finding people who've worked not necessarily in their business, but in the business in similar, who understand on a practical level what is being required, so that when the technology sits over it, or in some cases re-engineers it, or the processes change, there's that practical understanding of, well, we may have the tables, but I tell you at 1 o'clock when we put 2,000 Yorkshire puddings in the over 200 Yorkshire puddings in there, it doesn't fit. So even if we could seat them, we're going to have two. Yeah. We're going to have 2 seats because the oven takes 100. And I know that because I've been a chef, and no one else is going to know that. You have the best process design person in the world in technology. You can orchestrate this amazing ERP to bang 2,000 through, and it'll be great because we've got the right, what goes into Yorkshire pudding, eggs and milk. But I tell you, by being a chef, and then only those who know that that's how many the oven can take, and it needs to cool down afterwards. You need to get the temperature. I think that it's great. So if I could ask a question, how it sounds like it was a bit of circumstance there, but how do you entice people into tech?
Well, interestingly, so I took different approaches at different times.
Yeah.
So particularly in the past, I was looking for somebody fresh out of university that wanted to be developed.
Okay.
Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, it was cheaper.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
But it was cheaper, but also more than that. So I'll give you an example. We had a guy, Jacob.
Yeah.
Nice guy. Actually, it didn't look dissimilar to you, actually.
Okay. Nice guy. Good.
But he came out of university and he'd been working at Clark's shoe shop.
Yeah.
And sat him down. And he'd been doing computer science. So he didn't actually know anything about anything, really speaking.
Yeah.
He was a blank piece of paper. But he told me about how much he enjoyed working at Clark's shoe shop and how it was such a key moment in the life of children and in the parental journey. And he was so privileged to be a part of it. And I was like, whoa.
Okay.
You're hired.
I agree.
We'll train you. We'll educate you.
Yeah.
you don't know what you're doing anyway. So,
we
Just
can't
you
say-
wait till you see a person's face when they've had their Yorkshire pudding and it's good.
but just the passion and
Yeah.
that makes up for so
So
much.
much it does, yeah.
Now you can take that too far.
Yeah.
In terms of you can give yourself too much of a mountain to climb in some cases, and of course the world moves on. So Jacob was a good journey, and then he obviously developed to the point where he needed to move on.
Yeah.
And that was for his career. But since then I've got Rob. He's my IT manager. He had more experience
in tech.
Yeah, more experience. He'd been working in other companies. He knew a little bit more. He came a little bit more kind of skilled up out of the box.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was an increase in cost.
Yeah.
But actually, it's worked out very well. And I think that you always have to question. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no right or wrong approach. But I think that at that particular point in time, I needed a bit more support. I didn't have as much time to spend kind of bringing somebody on. And so that's worked really nicely. Then we've got Mark, who's my developer. He's my one developer.
Yeah.
Got some freelancers, but Mark is great. And again, when we sat down and we talked about it, it was more his personality and his passion rather than his actual portfolio of stuff that he'd programmed. And I think that counts for a lot. This is very much the way that the company works. Now, again, when you need a skilled individual, they've got to have the skills.
Yeah.
But I'd much rather have somebody who likes pubs and can be passionate about the business and wants to be there than the most skilled technical individual who was kind of just punching a clock.
I don't know about you, but the person with the right passion who buys into the business will then, if they're 80% there, they will want to get to 90, 95 because they're passionate and they know that they need the extra 15% to help the business. If they're already 95 but couldn't care less about what you do or not really interested in the team or doesn't really buy into the business attitude ethos, the negative culture and or just the impact of having that person in the business, even if they're not outwardly negative, just by virtue of being there not that engaged, not that interested, osmosis will happen and it will just drive over. That's my belief. I think solely my belief. But
I completely agree. And I think that, when you come back to what makes a good manager of a team, you've got to bring the energy. That is absolutely your responsibility. I think that's something that if you want to be a good manager, you've got to start working on yourself first. It's not about turning up with a new notebook and pencil. It's about, am I happy?
Yeah.
Do I want to be here? Do I believe in my product?
Yeah.
But then, frankly, sort your diet out. Sorting out.
Yeah.
Join the gym.
Yeah.
Because it's not about turning yourself into some kind of Greek god. It's about move your body.
Yeah.
Because if you're supposed to be a thought leader, you can't think if your brain's not working.
Yeah.
And that means
sleep's a big one for me.
Absolutely.
I really prioritize that.
Meditate.
Yeah.
There's no room for ideas to come to you if your brain is busy all the time.
Yeah.
I know it sounds a bit woo. But
no, it's just when people take it, but I'd say I've got a really good friend Nathan, who's really into all that sort of stuff, and maybe they sit down and do it in maybe a traditional, that's what meditation looks like. But for me, it's to go a dog walk. Yeah, go outside and sit. And actually, I would say, I'm peace and quiet in the fresh air. It's my own time. Sometimes silence, sometimes with a podcast, but mute, whatever. But that's my thinking time, and that's I totally
think it's
agree.
like that. You can't pour from an empty cup, so it's you have to actually. If you've got to caretake a team, to lead a team, you kind of have to be full of motivation, vision, in order to actually put that out into the world. I also imagine. So it sounds like you've got a team. They're a long-serving team. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, Rachel's, I think she's just clocked up 25 years.
Wow, okay,
Because she was in the pubs for a long time.
Yeah, of course.
Rob is relatively new in, but that's 2 years.
Yeah.
It's not exactly what you call transient, is it?
No.
Mark, I don't even know how long Mark's been with us.
A while.
6-7 years, something like that. And Michelle's in her second iteration, because unfortunately I hired Michelle, so she's our data analyst. Hired her about a month before COVID. And of course, we're staring at some fairly unpalatable options when we got into COVID.
I imagine.
Hospitality business. And unfortunately, we had to make Michelle redundant.
Yeah.
However, when we came out the other side and all of a sudden I was able to have a data analyst again, I picked up the phone to Michelle and said, look, I completely understand if you
never want to see me again.
But if you want your job back, I'd love to have you.
That's a phenomenal sign.
And she said, I literally had decided this week to put my CV together.
Wow.
Oh,
Absolutely.
wow.
And she came back.
That's fantastic. I'm actually really happy for you and Michelle.
Yeah, I agree.
And again, not sure if we should say this, but we did call her your API gateway earlier, which is actually she's a critical person to the company. But one of the things, obviously, in the context of being, a well-rounded leader, my question to you is: have you ever failed? So we've talked a lot about, what you've delivered for this company, and but what would you say is, have you ever failed, and what did that teach you?
Failed all the time. You fail all the time in big ways and small ways.
Okay.
We've had some systems that we put out that didn't go right. And in some cases you say, well, that's just poor communication, or in some cases that was not enough training, or not enough testing, or this, that, and the other. I mean, thankfully, no massive disasters, but you don't want to lose the crowd. And,
right.
And I mean, for me, one of the key things is I love coming to the pubs.
Yeah.
And I don't, there are two things. A, I don't want to come to the pub if I'm not proud of the product. That would be a disaster for me. And that would be time to look to the door.
Yeah.
More than that, I don't want to come to the pub for the managers and the chefs to not be happy to see me.
Yeah.
Kieron.
Exactly.
Special food delivery bin.
Yeah. We have a table for you.
Yeah. It's in the back.
So that is my worst nightmare. If you're not doing your job properly, and to be honest, coming out of COVID, we had a mountain to climb. Thanks to Eat Out to Help Out, we went from 0 to 110.
Right.
And of course, we had supply chain. We had every kind of issue under the sun.
Yeah.
And we were under a lot of pressure to sort things out very quickly.
Yeah, I imagine.
And it was difficult to make people understand that we were actually really struggling as well.
Right.
Because the pubs were struggling. Because they'd been sat in the garden for 3 months. They were not match fit. And you would be amazed at how physical the job is.
Yeah.
But more than that, I couldn't buy printers. So when the guys were saying, I've got a printer that's broken, it's been broken for 6 weeks, where is my new printer? I'm saying, I cannot buy them. And of course, people will listen to that, but they don't really think that's the case. And that's just one on a list of many. And all of a sudden, I mean, you mothball 500-year-old buildings, they want to fall down.
Yeah.
Just want to fall down.
Yeah.
So, everything was all of a sudden breaking. We had point of sale terminals, for example. A big place like this might have 10 point of sale terminals. Well, 2 of them were broken. They just wouldn't come back on. Printers were just full of fluff and grease, and they wouldn't come back on, and we couldn't replace them. And so we ended up in this situation where there was a narrative of everything is broken. And it took an awful lot of digging to get out of that hole.
Yeah.
There were a few times where I'm not going to the pub today.
Yeah.
They don't want to see me, and I don't want to see them.
Yeah, it must have just been the craziest period for. How do you deal with that personally when the vast majority of your workforce are pretty much overnight presumably sent home, and at the time I remember at the time, I think it was Boris made the announcement on the Thursday. On the Tuesday, the guy in the office was taking his chair down to his car. He still weren't quite believing it. And then he saw we're in a big mill, and just 2 or 3 people had obviously not brought the family car, and you saw people wheeling the chairs out.
Yeah.
But we were in a business where there were some people put on furlough, but in proportionate to the size of the business, it was small. I would imagine at the time here, proportionate to the size of the business, it was enormous. How do you deal with that emotionally? How do you carry people through? Yeah,
it was very difficult. And to be honest, I think the only reason I got through was because Mary, our managing director, CEO now, is very good with people.
Okay.
I was at the bottom at one point.
Yeah.
Because we went from 3,500 people down to 8.
Wow.
Because we went into COVID. It's no secret, I don't think. We were in the middle of a refinancing.
Right.
As a PLC.
Yeah.
Which obviously was, the timing couldn't have been worse.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, it was literally, you're down to barest minimum. And of course, the other problem that we had is the government were changing the rules every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So furlough meant one thing one week and it meant something completely other the next week. And we were in a situation where you'd get Treasury guidance on a Friday and a government regulation on a Monday, and you were trying to work out which was which. And so, we had HR, payroll, myself, a few other people, and obviously the accounts, the chief accountant.
Yeah.
We were trying to work through all of these different things because, we would say, well, right, we need to change some of the payroll calculations in the payroll system. you pick up the phone to the payroll company, they're all furloughed. And then, we need to change this, we need to change that. Well, there's no money to do that.
Yeah.
But we need to do it. One of the things that, the government was saying that they needed written confirmation of people going on furlough. You go, well, how are we going to do that with 3,500?
Yeah.
You say, DocuSign, it's going to cost you £10,000.
I was going to say, yeah.
We don't have £10,000.
Yeah.
So I had to write DocuSign over a week. So we have our own DocuSign.
What, your own?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Surprisingly easy, actually. I'm not sure what to pay for DocuSign in hindsight.
Might talk you outside of this.
Yeah. That would be great.
But it was that kind of thing. And those challenges just came one after another. Because the next thing, all of a sudden you have to do pay at table, which is just not what we do. But, this idea.
Sorry. Yeah.
So we had to pull that out of the hat. And then it was Eat Out to Help Out. And I don't know whether you ever looked at Eat Out to Help Out, but that was ridiculous.
Right.
Because they made it sound as though it was a discount, but it wasn't. It was government money. On a discount, you don't pay the VAT. On government money, they wanted the VAT.
Oh,
so you paid that anyway?
Yeah. But the issue that you have is you go to your point of sale provider and you say, dude, I need a new calculation. It's all right, it's a discount. And they said, no, read it again.
Yeah.
It's not a discount. It's a different tender type. So you say, okay, but what's the difference? Well, it's the VAT. And so all of a sudden you're saying, well, I'm only charging you half, but I need to calculate the VAT for the whole.
Yes, it's a different calculation. So you have to all of a sudden...
things still come out of the woodwork. Because then they say, well, it's not on soft drinks. So then you go, okay, I have my till split in two sides, food and drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no VAT on, or the VAT reject. Was the VAT rate reduced on food at that point? Or something had happened with the food?
Yeah.
But then alcoholic drinks were not included.
Right.
Okay.
So you go, okay, fine. Okay. So I tag all of my alcoholic products. But then they pulled this one out of the hat later when they wanted a bit more VAT, frankly. If you poured an alcoholic drink into a soft drink, the whole became...
so you then had to charge...
Gin and tonic.
Oh my gosh.
So your tonic was VAT-free or whatever it was.
Yeah.
As tonic.
So your tonic was VAT-free. Your gin was standard VAT rate. But at the point at which you put the one in the other, it becomes...
Wow.
And so that's where
I have no idea.
You didn't think this through, or did you?
Probably not. But so you went from being a couple of thousand people down to
3,500 people.
3,500 people down to 8. And you navigated this period, because I imagine 8 people have to then do
everything.
Yeah. And obviously, that's not taking into account, you're not like making the food and serving it and pulling the pints, but there is a huge operation behind it that has to keep running to a certain extent, right? During some of these periods. Yeah.
Buildings just want to fall down.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we had people that were having to go to buildings and just make sure that they were not...
Flush the leads, turn the water on and make sure that it's not crumbling.
Legionnaires' disease in the showers, in the hotels, things like that. Well, not that we had, but...
but that's
the shower.
It's
funny little things like that that we never considered in the past.
Because it's just wouldn't, would you? But why would you think about these things? And so you've come out of kind of that. Obviously, we talk a lot about transformation. That is a huge transformational period for you personally as a leadership team. Absolutely. And as a what would you say? Because obviously, one of our questions was going to be like, what's the biggest challenge you faced? I'm sort of imagining this probably would have been your answer.
Yeah, but I don't like to dwell on it, to be honest. I don't want to give it any more energy. It was such a painful period of time. And when you look at more positive challenges...
That's so the question would be positive. What did you learn from? What do you think you've taken away from it?
Oh, it's changed me completely.
Has it?
It's given me a hatred of government.
Let's spin that in a different way.
Wanted to take that bit out. It made me look at the world completely differently.
Yeah.
Nothing is the same ever again.
Yeah.
And I won't be doing it again.
You won't be right. Okay, fair enough. That's on record. But in terms of kind of how you pull together as a team, how are there lessons that we can? Because a lot of us go through, whether it's a personal transformation, personal challenges that then completely transform us. Within the business context, I know I've definitely had some where I have felt quite frankly, I talk about it very openly. PE transformation, first time I've ever been through it as a permanent member of staff. I felt bipolar. One day you think you're doing really well, the next day you don't. And I thought I was never going to come out of it. But, I did. And then now I'm in it and helping other people. When I go into a company, I speak to pretty much everybody who's in the position that I was in, and I say, it's okay. It's going to be okay. This is just the curve. This is just kind of part of the transformation. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a COVID-like transformation, but is there something that you can share with everyone that was sort of really positive for you around coming through that period in terms of like how you dealt with it at work?
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually. It changed the way that we work as a team because obviously in the past, every day you just turned up at the office.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden we're in this situation where, it's hybrid working.
Yeah.
And obviously for periods, it was completely working at home. Although I came into the office every day anyway, because it would have gone stir crazy.
We'll also cut that out. Were you a key worker?
IT, key worker.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Plus as a beekeeper.
Oh.
I had free reign to go wherever I wanted because I had to look after my livestock.
No way. So beekeepers are...
There you go.
That's the key to freedom, be a beekeeper.
The key to freedom is not to comply.
Well, jail, yeah.
Nobody went to jail.
No.
None of the regulations.
Thank
don't
God.
Start me.
Yeah, no. Wait. What did you learn? Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I think what's coming across, and I don't know if this kind of helps you contextualize your answer, is how much you're capable as a person, how much you can actually deal with when put under pressure. You got through it. You didn't break, did you?
I didn't break, but I did have to be talked down by Mary a couple of times. But that's just sometimes you learn from being managed.
Yeah.
You can actually take that lesson and say, well, actually, maybe I need to be a little bit more open to just behaving in a calmer and a more measured way. But I think this, with the move to the hybrid working, we introduced, I think I said before, we have a catch up on a Monday. It's not revolution, but it's quite nice to sit down around the table and make sure that everybody knows what everybody else is doing. Yeah. Now, we only introduced that because of hybrid working, because in the past, everybody would have been in the office all the time. And actually, nobody, it didn't feel as though anybody needed to be brought up to speed because it was an open plan office. And frankly, everybody knew what everybody else's business was. Yeah. Right. In some respects, it wasn't efficient in the classical terms of did I get through my to-do list? But crikey, you did know what was going on. Yeah. And, it's a relatively small office. I mean, it started to bulge at the seams a little bit, but it was a relatively small office and everybody knew everything that was going on because, you can hear them on the phone. There was no privacy whatsoever. But having gone to then a completely distributed kind of organization, we needed to put some of these things in place. And I think it was the HR team that brought it through first. They were having a catch up literally every day. Yeah. And so we sort of thought, well, why don't we just get together? And now we have half an hour of tinfoil hat time. Yeah. Yes. And we have an actual IT meeting. And so...
What do you call them again?
Tinfoil hat time.
No, yes, that one.
Snappy meetings.
Snappies. Monday morning snappies. I really like that.
And there is a protocol to Snappy.
Oh, right.
You can't ramble. Yeah. You can't. If you need a meeting about something, go and have a meeting about something. Yes. Don't bring that to Snappy. Snappy's bullet points.
I love that.
The PowerPoint.
Just get it done. That's
it. So look into the future, Kieron. Where I get from your, where do you see your role in Brunning Price? Where do you see technology going in the sector? And what are you excited about within technology? And that
robots
does not have to be around.
Really simple. Robots.
Why?
Because we're going to be the HR department of the future.
Okay.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah. Do you know, when you were saying it earlier, what I had in my mind was that, that evolution of man picture. Yeah. So it's like monkeys, man, and then robots. Like Tesla. That's kind of what I... Yeah.
But the thing is, the more you think about it, and I mean, I have joked about this and I have been joked at about this because I've been trying to get robot hoovers in for ages.
Right.
I've just started to look at that.
Yeah, robot hoovers. I mean, they're not quite there yet in a commercial setting. I mean, they would choke on a chip, frankly. But the simple fact is that there is a direction of travel for these things. And if you look at what Boston Dynamics and Tesla robots and all the rest of it can do, you say, well, a Tesla robot is going to cost you 20,000 quid.
Is that what it is?
That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Right. So 20,000 quid, you say, well, what can it do? And the point is that it's now a software problem, not a hardware problem.
Right.
So the hardware problem is tricky because that's where you have to wait for materials and really clever designs to come through. Yeah. When it becomes a software problem, it's exponential development. And so all of a sudden, it can go and mow the lawn today. The next week, it's able to cut the hedge with a pair of shears.
Right.
And you say, well, for £20,000, flat fee.
Yeah.
Say I'm going to get 4 or 5 years out of my robot.
Okay.
It can cut the lawn at 2 a.m., cut the hedges at 3 a.m. It can deep clean the kitchen between 4 and 6, and it can hoover the pub between 6 and 7.
Yeah.
The pub is pristine when you walk through the door,
Yeah.
and then it can stand over the pot wash for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I think we're probably, within my career even, I think we'll start to see some of these things creeping in. And you say, well, for £20,000, so over 5 years, so
Yeah.
£4,000 a year,
Yeah.
it's not going to say anything.
Yeah. It's not going to bring it sick.
It's not going to put its hands anywhere they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It's just going to do robot stuff.
Yeah.
It's whatever you told it to do, it's going to do it. Rain or shine, it's not going to get emotional, anxious, or anything.
Yeah.
And so I do think that it will revolutionize some industries. And again,
And do you think your industry is susceptible to the, given, as you described, it can stand over the pot, it can do the hoovering, it
look
can...
at the pressures we're under now?
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, the direction of travel of government regulation is making this more likely, not less.
Right.
Because you look at what they did to us in the budget without getting political about things.
Right.
Nobody saw that coming. They have money to invest in areas.
Yeah.
They could put it in a Norwegian cruise line. They can put it in a South African diamond mine. I'm making it up, but
I know. Yeah. Yeah.
they can put that money where they're going to get a return. It's not unreasonable at all. If the government keeps moving things in a direction that undermines our business, we will not get the investment that we would otherwise get. And so the challenge for us is, unfortunately, to try and stay one step ahead of our government.
Yeah.
And so as a part of that, productivity is huge.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. And it always makes me slightly chuckle when the government complains about productivity and how we're a very unproductive country. Look in the mirror sometimes.
Yeah.
It's regulations that
Free us up to be productive
Yeah,
sometimes.
it's regulate. And this is why, again, without getting political, I think that there are countries that are making some really significant inroads into this problem. Argentina in particular.
Yeah.
Love that guy.
Okay.
I mean, as a person, I don't know, but when you look at the regulation that he's unpeeling from a very inefficient economy, I think we learned something. There are ways to do that. People might agree or disagree, but I think from my point of view, when you look at the business, we have to find a way to stay ahead unless we get some impetus from the government to unpeel some regulation and to cut us some slack.
In the context of kind of, some people might listen to this and hear, oh, robots are going to replace us. Personally, if a robot replaces me as a pot wash, I'm very happy about that. But some people might rely on that income because it's, low skilled work, low paid, but low skilled. Yeah. How do you think people can future proof against some of this advancement, particularly maybe in your industry? We've talked about robot servers. Will students be out of jobs?
Don't get me wrong. You see, I don't see a place for robot servers.
Okay, at all?
No.
That's very interesting. Oh, because
I'm a human. I like humans.
Yeah.
You need to not confuse my fascination with robots for my lack of fascination with humans.
Yeah.
I believe that we are energetic beings. Okay, we're bald monkeys, but we're energetic beings. We thrive when we are
in community
with other people.
Yeah.
I think it would be a really cold day when you went downstairs and there were robots everywhere.
Yeah.
That is not my point. And it comes back to the overall ethos of technologically advanced, but in the background.
Okay.
So our servers should be happy human beings.
Yeah.
Enjoy their job, that, enjoy being with and interacting with customers. That's absolutely key.
Okay.
And I completely see your point in terms of, what about our gardeners? And that's absolutely true. I think that where you get to is that there is a place for somebody to be a conductor of an orchestra without playing an instrument themselves. And so our gardens could look better, but they're very expensive. The time that is spent cutting the hedge and mowing the lawn could be spent designing, could be spent doing stuff. So for example, planting seeds, that takes time to do that. That takes planning and forethought. There isn't time within the budget of a normal pub to go completely over the top with a beautiful garden. However, if you have a skilled gardener saying, I want all of these things here and I want my Tesla robot to weed it every day and I want it to look after these different things, that's where you actually could make the world a much better place by just being taking advantage of, in effect, cheap labor.
Yeah. Yeah. So I suppose, is your message then kind of, if you are part of an industry where it could be where robotics is introduced or pioneered, is your message then, you're not necessarily at risk of losing your job, just be more skilled and become a manager of the robot rather than being the robot yourself, really?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a revolution in that, people walk in one day and the robots have replaced them. I think you end up in a situation where you say, well, we won't replace a vacant role because we could stick a robot in there. I think there's a more natural tapering of where jobs do. Or, for example, you say, well, if I gave you a robot, could you make the garden more beautiful? Yes. Well, okay, well, let's have a robot.
Yeah.
And I think that what I think AI struggles with is creativity and and human inspiration and human vision.
Yeah.
And so I think actually the world would be a better place if we had more room for that.
Yeah.
I mean, take architecture. I mean, it's not something I'm particularly well versed in, but I know a nice building and I know a horror.
Yeah.
Why do we make concrete bricks, or why did we make concrete bricks in the 60s? There's nothing human about that.
Yeah.
There's no emotion in that. Somebody literally sat down with a ruler.
Yeah.
Whereas you look at some of the things that people came up with 150 years ago. Okay. Bluntly, stuff was cheaper.
Yeah.
The gap between the poor and the wealthy was bigger. So rich people could sponsor huge projects and poor people would make it.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of where we're going back to.
Yeah.
And so what we need is for people with vision and people with passion to come up with grand designs and then use robots to do something that would be completely financially impossible at the moment.
Right.
Thank you so much, Kieron. I think there's probably a few things that I've taken from that. I think firstly, well, I'll do it in the order that it sat with it. The calmness during those extreme periods of uncertainty from Mary. I think I've been the beneficiary. I've been led by a chap called Matt, who I think in those moments displayed absolute calmness in a time where lots of other people were creating chaos. And I could really resonate with me that actually by being measured, by being honest as well around the uncertainty, but the calmness specifically, I think that was, as I say, I think that really sat with me. I think the proximity to the customer is, and I said this part way through, but a lot of people that we speak to, their businesses are advocates of being close to the customer, empower the customer. I think that you can demonstrate that you do that, and not everyone can. I think that the relationship that technology has with the business, where it isn't intrusive, where it's very much enabling, where it's very much, it understands where it plays in the overall ecosystem and it really contributes to it positively, rather than we've got all these applications, let's throw them at you and why aren't you using them? It's very much, no, we've got forgive me, the lady that you mentioned, who'd been a publican, who'd been in the business, going, that's not going to work because I know that, because I understand the bit, but technology can really help here. I think the innovation perhaps around the dashboards and the real-time reporting, creating that competition interpub or regionally perhaps, or at key moments of the day, going, right, Saturday afternoon, 5 p.m, we've got 4 hours before closing. How do we become top Carlsberg seller or whatever it may be? How do we shift more burgers and chips between 5 and 7 because we're on day? I love that. That's sort of the industry we're in terms of competition. So I love that. And then the future, I think a lot of people, well, perhaps at the beginning, exactly as Belmer was, well, how do I make sure I'm not the robot? How do I make sure the robot doesn't replace me? But I think that attitude of no, we're going to become the HR, the operations department for the robot, for that innovation is a really interesting way of looking at it. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's been a really great talk.